Tatooine, twin suns, 120 degrees in the shade, and the shade is in short supply. Hoth, cold enough to kill you before you find shelter. Mustafar, literally on fire. Coruscant, a planet with no sky, no soil, no open water you'd ever want to drink. We watch heroes hop between these worlds like they're stops on a road trip, but stop and ask the question nobody asks. Could you actually live there? Not visit, not pass through with a ship waiting. Live. Be born, raise a family, grow old, without a hazmat suit and a supply convoy. And when you go down the list, the answer is grim. Almost none of them. The galaxy we fell in love with is a gauntlet of death worlds with a handful of green exceptions, and most of the planets in Star Wars would kill an ordinary person in days. Before we rank, we need a framework. 5 variables that determine whether a world is livable or lethal. Temperature. Can your body hold its core heat without gear? Humans can manage a dry range of roughly -40 to perhaps 60 degrees Celsius for short periods, but that upper limit is deceptive, and sustained exposure well below it becomes dangerous fast. Atmosphere. Can you breathe it, and is the pressure compatible with your biology? Water. Is there surface water, and can you reach it without dying on the way? Food. Is there arable land, huntable game, or something you can actually eat? And finally, wildlife, because the climate can be perfect and something still might eat you. Run every major Star Wars world through those 5 filters. The results aren't encouraging. Mustafar is the clearest kill. The atmosphere is turbulent and ash-laden, thick with black smoke and choking ash that falls like rain. The Klegger Corp Mining Facility, the structure where Obi-Wan and Anakin fight in Revenge of the Sith, uses repulsor vents to actively block toxic lava fumes from the air inside. Those vents get damaged during the duel, so 2 men in Jedi robes are fighting meters from open rivers of lava, while the industrial systems keeping the air breathable are failing around them. The film presents this as an action sequence. Real-world physics makes it a slow execution. Volcanic environments near active lava produce carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and hydrogen sulfide in concentrations lethal to an unprotected human within minutes. The native Mustafarians survive because they have, as their species profile puts it, burly, tough bodies that can withstand extreme heat. Baseline humans don't. Mustafar isn't a dangerous planet. It's a furnace that happens to have a landing pad. Hoth is the cold mirror of that problem. The atmosphere is breathable, confirmed clean. So you step outside and you can inhale. What you can't do is survive the night. Overnight temperatures in the Echo Base region plunge to an estimated -60 degrees Celsius. The film is unambiguous about the survivability window. A rebel officer warns Luke he'll freeze before reaching the first marker. Luke, in full cold weather gear, is incapacitated within a brief blizzard. Han Solo cuts open a tauntaun carcass to use as emergency thermal insulation. Even tauntauns, native animals evolved specifically for this environment, die from cold exposure when left out overnight. At that temperature range, an unprotected human faces severe hypothermia and loss of consciousness in under an hour. Hoth has breathable air, liquid water buried under all that ice, and absolutely nothing else working in your favor. Bespin deserves a mention for a different reason. Cloud City floats in a narrow atmospheric band where temperature, pressure, and gas composition happen to be compatible with human life. Characters walk outside on open platforms without equipment, and the film treats this as unremarkable. Below that band is a gas giant, methane, hydrogen, crushing pressure. The horror of Bespin is entirely implied. Every outdoor scene is set at the only altitude where you wouldn't die instantly, and the film never once tells you how thin that margin is. Tatooine orbits 2 suns, Tatoo 1 and Tatoo 2, in a circumbinary configuration. When C-3PO's internal thermostat registered upon crashing there, it read 42 degrees standard. That's roughly 42 Celsius in the shade, in a place where the heat is so extreme that only a small portion of the planet's northern hemisphere can support intelligent life at all. The broader equatorial zones are uninhabitable without technology. The reason anyone lives on Tatooine at all is moisture evaporators, stationary devices that extract water from even the driest atmosphere. Every family on that planet has staked its survival on a machine that produces, by older reference estimates, roughly a liter per day per unit, requiring dozens of units to sustain a single farm. Tatooine also once had oceans. It dried out over millennia, and the breathable atmosphere you're taking for granted is residual oxygen from that earlier era. The current biosphere is too weak to sustain it through biological production. You're breathing inherited air. And somewhere in the sand is a crate dragon. The specimen in The Mandalorian ran over 100 meters, plus a sarlacc that digests its prey over an extended and deeply unpleasant period. The Tusken Raiders survive through nomadic water harvesting, full-body protective clothing, and raiding the moisture farms of anyone who settled near their territory. You could survive on Tatooine. The question is whether you'd want to spend your life that way. Dagobah is breathable. Luke and Yoda live there without equipment, and Yoda managed roughly 19 years of exile on the planet. The atmosphere is oppressive, hot, saturated with humidity, thick with organic matter from a dense, active biosphere. It runs 2 seasons, a dry period where upland areas become too hot for most life, and a wet season of violent lightning storms, dense fog, and prolonged heavy rainfall. Dragon snakes live in the muddy water. One swallows R2-D2 briefly on screen. Yoda managed. Most people aren't Yoda. Kamino solved its lethality through sheer engineering. The planet is entirely ocean, racked by permanent storms, with no land surface anywhere. The Kaminoans built their cities on stilts above the water, developed aquaculture of native ocean species to feed their population, and imported what they couldn't grow. Every meal, every drop of fresh water, every structure on Kamino exists because someone decided to refuse the planet's terms. That's not living on a world. That's a permanent negotiation with one, conducted entirely on credit. Jakku sits in the western reaches and reads like Tatooine without the moisture farming economy. Where Tatooine has established spaceports and a functional, if lawless, agricultural infrastructure, Jakku has Nima Outpost, where a trader named Unkar Plutt controls the water and food supply for an entire scavenger population. Rey's in-universe survival guide describes strict water rationing and constant shelter protocols against sandstorms. Jakku has a single star rather than 2, which likely makes it marginally cooler by physics, but the social infrastructure is far more precarious. Tatooine might kill you through environment. Jakku might kill you because one person controls the water and decided you're not worth a portion. Coruscant is its own category, and it's the most instructive one. Before the city covered it entirely, the planet had mountains, oceans, forests, and ice caps. It was naturally habitable. The last visible remnant of that original surface is Monument Plaza, the top of a buried mountain, now a park inside a planet-wide city. The natural water bodies are entirely gone, with no remaining surface water to sustain 1 trillion permanent residents. The infrastructure relies on polar cap stations that melt residual ice and distribute it through a planet-wide pipe network, supplemented by mass imports from agricultural worlds. The lower levels, below the well-lit upper city, below level 1313 and beyond, receive little to no sunlight, breathe heavily polluted air, and operate under criminal governance. Coruscant is what happens when you take a naturally habitable world and crowd it to the absolute maximum for thousands of years. The result is technically survivable if you live at the right level and trust the supply chain, and genuinely lethal if you don't. It's not a death world in the way Mustafar is. It's something quieter and more instructive, a habitable world converted through density and time into a different kind of trap. Naboo is the benchmark for everything that comes next. Mid-rim location, breathable atmosphere. Humans and Gungans have coexisted there for generations without life support. The surface runs grassy plains, rolling hills, swampy lakes, wetlands, and rocky river valleys, with Theed's river cities built to complement rather than replace the natural landscape. Freshwater is abundant. Gungan underwater cities confirm large, stable bodies of water, and navigable rivers feed the human settlements directly. The dangerous megafauna, OPC killers, Kolo clawfish, Sando aqua monsters, are confirmed ocean predators. The surface grazes quietly with shocks. Every habitability criterion clears: atmosphere, temperature by visual evidence, fresh water, fertile land, manageable surface threats. Naboo is the answer to the question this video is asking. Alderaan was the other answer, until 0 BBY. The planet held forests, plains, grasslands, and thousands of lakes connected by waterways across its entire surface. Human colonists arrived roughly 27,500 years before the Battle of Yavin and built, as the record describes it, a peaceful civilization in harmony with nature. Breathable atmosphere, temperate climate, fertile enough to export wine, art, and luxury goods made from local spices and herbs. 8,000 species of grass alone. Alderaan passed every test. Grand Moff Tarkin destroyed it not for its resources. He chose it for political terror, to intimidate Leia and demonstrate the Death Star's power to a watching galaxy. But the loss underneath that political calculation is ecological. The galaxy had a confirmed, stable, beautiful, temperate world with 2 billion inhabitants and a culture built around living gently in it. It took about 4 seconds to erase. Yavin 4 is livable in the way a wilderness is livable. Real, functional, but honest about its terms. The climate is confirmed comfortable and temperate, the atmosphere breathable, the land masses covered in dense jungle. The Rebel Alliance ran full base operations there with thousands of personnel and no life support suits, which settles the breathability question permanently. The forests support a complex food chain, including piranha beetles, aquatic gundarks, crystalline snakes, and underground leviathan worms feeding on tree roots. You could live on Yavin 4. You would spend a meaningful portion of your time watching where you step. Endor filmed its exterior sequences in the giant redwood forests of Northern California, which is the most honest thing the franchise ever did about that planet's environment. Temperate, forested, breathable, with oceans visible from orbit, and a biosphere complex enough to support a sentient species in Stone Age conditions. The main survival risk on Endor is the Ewoks, whose first response to encountering the rebel commandos was to capture them as potential food offerings. Even the nicest planet in the ranking has locals who might eat you. Takodana is where Maz Kanata ran a castle for 1,000 years without apparent difficulty, beside a large lake, surrounded by dense forest. Every visible detail of the environment, the mid-rim location, the temperate Lake District terrain used for filming, the cool water and green canopy, points to a world with no particular ambition to kill you. It may be the most casually survivable planet in the saga precisely because it has no particular story importance. It's just a nice place someone put a bar. Here is what all of this adds up to. The Star Wars galaxy contains, by canonical estimate, over 3.2 billion habitable systems across roughly 400 billion stars. 3.2 billion sounds enormous until you realize that's less than 1% of the stellar population, and that figure measures systems capable of supporting life, not the subset that are actually pleasant to live in. The worlds in this ranking represent the pleasant fraction: temperate, breathable, wet, fertile, with manageable predator populations. Naboo, Alderaan, Endor, Yavin 4, Takodana, Chandrila, Mon Mothma's pastoral homeworld of prairies, forests, and peaceful seas. A short list. And the story of Star Wars, viewed through that lens, starts to look less like a space opera and more like a resource conflict that nobody named. Every government crowds onto the core worlds. Every rebellion sets up in a jungle or a forest moon. Every empire builds its capital on the one place that used to be green. The Death Star's first target was one of the handful of genuinely livable worlds in a galaxy of mostly inhospitable rock. That changes what Alderaan's destruction means. It was an act of political terror. it was also the permanent erasure of something irreplaceable. We fell in love with a galaxy that would mostly kill us. Twin sun deserts, ice plains, oceans of lava, a capital with no sky, beautiful on a screen, lethal under your feet. Strip away the heroes with their ships always waiting, and the vast majority of Star Wars is a death world gauntlet with a scattering of green exceptions. And those exceptions are the whole story. They're what the empires fight over. They're where everyone crowds in. They're the reason a galaxy of 100 billion stars somehow always comes back to the same few planets, because those are the only ones you could actually call home. The galaxy isn't a playground. It's a desert with a few oases, and everyone who matters is standing in one of them, hoping the others don't notice how little green there really is. Subscribe if you want more of this. It genuinely helps.